Well, I've been looking forward to this render for a while. We kind of got off schedule. We did the first Knight Rider Tobacco War episode. Then we usually have a render where we talk about it like immediately, but we kind of had a fill-in render with Rich Froning. But this works out perfect.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of the fittest man in the world, Rich Froning. So we've now played these 2 Knight Rider Tobacco War episodes. So that's what we're here to talk about. And we have a pretty good guest list here. A varied assortment of guests.
Yes.
We got my dad, Gary Believer Newcomb, who someone sent you a gift.
Oh, good.
I'm going to go ahead.
Money?
I'm going to go ahead. Better than money.
Better.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. Then I have Jeff Gardner. Now, you're not from Kentucky. But
I am from Kentucky.
You are from Kentucky.
Born and raised, yep.
You currently don't live in Kentucky.
Correct. Currently in Oklahoma.
But Jeff did something that's very rare in the bear grease world, is that he basically like hand delivered this podcast to us. For real. I'm not kidding. People all the time suggest stuff, which I love. I mean, keep them coming. A lot of times the suggestions are about stories that maybe people don't have the full grasp on, and maybe it's a great idea. It's not someone's fault if they send me an incomplete.
Right.
But when somebody goes, this is a great story, here's the book about it, I know the author, here's his number, also know a secondary guest that you could interview about. I think this
Who
would
happens
fit.
to be my wife's grandpa.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he just like hand delivered the whole thing. And then, so we ordered the book and we were just like, yeah, this is great. And so anyway, thanks, Jeff.
Hey, happy to help. Happy to help. Big fan. Love what you guys do. And like I said, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I read the story and was like, I literally was sitting there in my wife's grandfather's house and I went, man, I bet you could make a killing with a podcast of this. I said, but then I was like, I would love to hear somebody do this. And then it just clicked. I was like, this is exactly what these guys do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was able to find a, email for you and get it to you.
It worked out.
Here we are.
So your grandfather is Dr. Lloyd Murdoch. Is that correct?
So my wife's grandfather. Yeah, he's
your wife's grandfather.
I, selfishly consider him a grandfather. He's been like a grandfather to me. So
yeah.
I may refer to him that, and you may hear us refer to him as Bubby because that's what the rest of the world calls him outside of academia.
He was on the first episode, and he's essentially a
agronomist.
An agronomist, and was a tobacco expert. So he was the one, real soft-spoken guy that spoke on the first episode. So that was great. And then, so your brother-in-law, so y'all are married to sisters, whose grandfather.
He's married to my sister.
I'm just not going to worry about the connections, okay? These guys somehow know each other.
Yeah, family relations.
Dr. Murdoch is Drew's grandfather.
He is my grandfather.
He's your grandfather.
Yes.
We're from Kentucky.
It's
family trees get messy.
Yeah.
I heard the motto of Kentucky was 15 million people, 15 last names.
Wow. I like it. I like it anytime we can jab somebody else.
Exactly.
Other than us.
That's
exactly.
all right.
Where at in Kentucky are y'all from?
So I was actually born in Princeton, where one of the raids happened, and where
the Vatican of the Knight Rider story.
Yep. My grandparents still live there. It's where Josh came down and did the interviews with my grandfather, and one county over was where Bill Cunningham was, and but now I've since shifted. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky now. So.
Okay. Awesome, man. Well,
I'm from Louisville, born and raised in Louisville.
Are both y'all? So both of y'all are Louisville fans?
We are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Were y'all sad to see Calipari go?
It didn't make any difference
Not
to
to
me,
them.
man.
They're
It wasn't
the
me,
other
man.
I kind of wish he was still there because they'd be
1-5.
One and 5 in the SEC instead of
doing our
Mark Pope.
Maybe 1-5.
Everybody loves Mark Pope with the Wildcats.
Just rub it in.
But we are actually 2 Cardinals and a family of Wildcats.
Okay.
So, and now I got a little one of my own that it's tough, Clay. Man, they're wearing him out. They're bringing him over to their side, but he loves his Uncle Drew. So I got a feeling, the more we start running around together, he'll be all right. He'll be all Louisville.
Well, to finish out introductions, this is my neighbor, friend, the best chicken farmer that I know, Terrell Spencer, known as Spence. And man, do you mind picking up your tea jar? I
Here we
have
go.
deep respect for a man that'll drink tea out of a pickle jar.
Man, this is
Actually, that's
spaghetti sauce
spaghetti
jar.
sauce jar.
See, it's got a little Italy here.
Spence comes to our church every week with a different jar.
Showing out, huh?
Waste not
everybody
wine.
And I
else-
get called out. This is like, when you talk about honorary farmers on this podcast, you call a farmer out, he's just going to dig in, right? So
Well, it's funny because everybody brings water bottles now. This generation is obsessed with hydration. I mean, back when I was a kid and Dad, you'd be the same. I mean, we watered like cattle, like once a day,
Yeah.
And now everybody has like huge water bottles.
Stanley cups.
But
and
this
all
is
that.
acceptable in my book, like just like a jar, rather than a big water bottle or something. So,
tea
but-
tastes better out of a jar.
but
It's
I
fact.
agree.
Spence is a farmer, and he kind of had some insight into the farm side of it, so wanted to have Spence here. But what I haven't told you, if you haven't figured it out already, is that there's a federal officer amongst us. Jeff works for the FBI.
What?
What?
Yeah,
I do. That's
Dad wouldn't have come if I'd.
What you
told him
hiding,
that.
Gary?
Oh, man.
What you hiding, Gary?
I drove from Mena up here in 35 minutes. So,
outside of my jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Nothing I can do about that.
No, and I know we don't have to go into detail about it, but that's interesting. How long you worked for the FBI?
It'd be 5 years this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm fairly new, to the career as a whole, but it's been
Do
good.
they call you kid?
Call me Utah.
Utah.
Give me
from
two.
Kentucky.
That's right. Now, but yeah, about 5 years, and like I said, that's how we ended up out in Oklahoma.
Were you in law enforcement before? Like, what's a career path?
Tell you what, Clay, it's been an interesting ride. So me and Drew met in college. We both played college baseball at University of Louisville.
Okay.
And then graduated there, kicked around the minor leagues for a little bit, and then literally was finishing playing, was getting married, and
To his sister.
And
Got the connection.
I studied criminal justice in college, and then in 2017 I was just gotten engaged to Drew's sister Chelsea, and needed something to say at Thanksgiving other than I was going to go play independent league baseball again for $1,100 a month for 4 months.
Like, okay.
I was always interested in law enforcement. My dad was a police officer. My mom's dad was a police officer, and it's always been big in my family. So I looked into it. My dad had always mentioned, trying to go the federal route, and so I started looking some of that up on USA Jobs, and I was like, man, you can just apply for the FBI. Check this out. So I kind of just did it on a whim, and made it through the first couple steps, and then got denied, didn't get in. But the more I looked at it, I thought, man, I think this is what I actually want to do. So had to wait a year. Like I said, I finished playing baseball one more year, came back home, got into, believe it or not, like trying to sell advertisements and tickets for a minor league wrestling outfit.
Wow.
So if you look at
This backstory can't be real.
I'm telling you, brother.
My daughter watched Nacho Libre for her birthday the other day.
Okay, so
So
if you go
yeah.
on Netflix and you watch, there's a documentary called like Wrestlers or something, or Wrestling, and it's a documentary where they follow Ohio Valley Wrestling. Well, a buddy of mine who had told me whenever I was done playing, he'd offer me a job in medical sales, which is what he did, and from my locker of my last game, I sent him a text and said, "Hey, dude, just finished up. I'm getting married in a month. I need a job. Like, is that you still open?" He said, "Yeah, come see me on Monday." So I did. And I'm expected all right, we're going to start talking about this whole medical sales thing. Well, no, he says, I got a job for you. He says, I just bought this minor league wrestling thing. You ever heard of Ohio Valley Wrestling? Yeah, which if you follow wrestling, it's huge because a lot of the greats from the old days came up through this.
Through Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio Valley Wrestling. And so look at it on Netflix. There's a pretty interesting documentary. You could see a little insight to that world.
Okay.
But I did that for a few months, and then he finally let me in on the medical sales side. And so I was in and out of spine surgeries for about a year and a half, and then had reapplied to the Bureau and ended up getting in.
Okay.
So it's been a wild ride.
Wow. It
And
sounds
here
like
I
it.
am.
Here you are.
Here I am on
And
Bear
now,
Grease.
now you're a professional podcast scout.
It's good to be here. You know.
It's not far
Let-
from wrestling.
let us know if you have anything else
You
going
got
on. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
So,
interesting.
anyways,
Well, so Dad, a guy sent this to you. We have his name. We get that little letter right there, that little handwritten letter. It's torn in half. Don't know why. Get the top part. So yeah, Jeff Dwyer out of Washington sent this to Gary Believer Newcomb.
Wow.
And man, it's so old that it has a plug that's like a 1/4 inch and has 2 little plugs, but it actually, whoa.
It used to work.
You may get shocked.
It's disco lamp.
It'll cause
It
a
pretty
seizure.
much works.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was broken in transit. It cracked. He did a great job of packing it. But do you mind if we keep this here, though?
You can.
Do you mind?
can.
You
I
think
mean,
Judy
it's-
wants that?
It's a lamp, but it's also like
An ashtray.
yeah, or an ashtray, or like a
Planter?
caddy. Like put your
I didn't
bedside
really look at it.
sundries in there. You put your
Yeah.
pocket knife and your wallet in there at night.
Yeah,
Now you can put your
could be
iPhone in
dangerous. Well, this is a throwback to the Black Panther, the first episode of Bear Grease. We did a episode called the myth of the Southern Mountain Lion, and at the end of it, we talked about Black Panthers, and not a week goes by, I'm without exaggeration, that someone doesn't send me something online about Black Panthers
Wow.
because Dad believes in them.
Yeah.
Just spurning the science. So anyway, you got a new lamp.
Are you
which
sure
I'm
that's
really
a
proud of.
panther? That might be a salamander.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Kind of looks like a salamander.
Yeah,
this
the
guy's
artwork
name?
on this is just terrible. I mean, it hardly even looks like a panther, but you can see his tail curled right here. I mean, like the person that made that, I mean, I don't know, but it's wonderful. So congratulations,
Hey, thank
Dad.
you. Thank you, Jeff.
Stylized.
Yeah,
That's
Thank
awesome.
you, Jeff. That's pretty awesome,
Jeff
man.
Dwyer,
I've
he-
never had a gift that I would treasure more, I don't think.
He wrote in and sent me a picture of it and said, "I'd like to send this to Gary Believer Newcomb." And I said, "I got an address for you."
yeah, we'll take it.
And I had my Believer hat in the truck, and I forgot to put it on.
Oh man.
So anyway, that's very nice.
Well, the Night Rider Tobacco War of Tennessee and Kentucky, 2-part
Fascinating
episode.
story.
So, would y'all have grown up knowing about this story?
I didn't learn about it until I married into the family. I think my first trip to Princeton was actually during the Black Patch Festival.
Yeah.
First time I'd gone down there.
So Princeton still holds the Black Patch Festival every fall, and around the time that they're smoke fire and tobacco. And I went to that festival ever since I was.
Really? What do they do there?
Oh, it's just they shut down Main Street. They have all kinds of little tents and things set up, selling stuff. I remember when I was super young, we would always do like a Frisbee contest where accuracy, distance, and stuff like that. So I was always geared up for that. They do pancake breakfast and serve the town.
So how big is Princeton, Kentucky?
Probably 4,000 or 5,000 people, maybe
Okay.
6, something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you can you smell the dark fire
Oh, yeah.
tobacco when it's
Oh, yeah.
burning? Does
Yeah.
it smell like hickory smoke or does it smell like tobacco smoke?
It's very, very unique. I will say that.
Really?
You get the smell of hickory, just much like if you throw something in the smoker and put hickory chips in it.
Right.
It's a lot like that kind of smell, but it does have a distinct smell.
Because the tobacco's not burning.
No, it's not. It's the woods are the wood on the bottom of the floor of the barn are covered with sawdust, and it's just that smoke that rises up. And
Did you have family that grew tobacco?
Nope.
No.
No, I don't have any. We don't have any other than Western Oklahoma. We don't have any farmers out in our family.
Yeah.
I went to basic with a guy that their family grew tobacco. I was thinking
Where?
about it, and I'm not sure. Just in Kentucky, his
In
big old
Kentucky.
dude named Recton. He'd talk about going in the tobacco patch, and if it was wet, like they'd get sick, like when they worked it. I guess because of the nicotine. So, anyways,
Oh, really? It was like brushing up against them?
yeah, I guess just working you can't go in there when it's wet, but I just randomly remember that the other day. So listening to this, that's my type.
Interesting.
It used to be all over too. I mean,
Yeah.
even in there, I can recall. I grew up basically in the city in Louisville, and so there would be times where you drive through and you'd see patches of open land, within city limits where people were growing tobacco in, and it just
In
would be
your
over.
lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Really?
remember in 4th grade, it was still like, that's the grade in Kentucky where you learn all about Kentucky history and all that. And I remember learning that was like the number one cash crop back then. I doubt it is now. I'm sure it's
No,
corn and
per acre
soybeans.
it still is.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's always been huge. It's
Yeah.
Kentucky's kind of funny. We're just known for man's vices like tobacco, bourbon, and horse racing. Man, if you want to, get drunk, have a cigarette, and bet on some horses, man, it is a one-stop shop.
Man, I started. I don't think they grew a lot of tobacco here in the Ozarks. It certainly, I think it was grown at times, but this was not known for that. I really started learning about tobacco when I started going to East Tennessee and running around with Roy Clark, who's a guy that Roy's still alive, is in his 70s, and they had tobacco allotments. They just sold their tobacco allotments, as I understand it, in the last 20 years. But that's the way it went, Dad. I don't know if you knew it. We didn't really get into the modern tobacco stuff, but back in the day, just people grew it and there wasn't a lot of regulation. But after about the time of the tobacco wars and a lot of federal regulation came in on the tobacco market, and they started doing allotments for tobacco. And basically the government would say, like, you can grow 5 acres of tobacco, period, every year, but you could sell your allotment to a farmer. And so if you didn't want to grow it, is this right? Do y'all know some of that stuff?
Yeah, so my grandfather knows obviously a little bit more about the allotment, but from what I've gathered, that's sounds pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Roy Clark grew up, and now they call it backer. I'm sure I can't believe I went through this whole episode without saying backer, but that's the way they say it in East Tennessee. Like,
Yep.
They're not joking or trying to be cute. It's backer.
Backer or tobacco?
Tobacco.
Yeah. Bill Cunningham said it several times. Tobacco. Yeah.
Tobacco. Yeah. Tobacco. Yeah. But Roy was in his lifetime plowing with a horse, like hand plowing tobacco. But it was such a convenient crop because you could grow a small acreage and make that much money.
Yeah.
Which was astonishing. We had a couple of corrections on this episode, and one of them, there was a modern tobacco farmer that told me actually the yield, ton per acre yield that we said was way off. We said it was 4,000 pounds per acre, and he said even today, in like the best case scenario, you don't get that much. He said you get like 2,000. So anyway, but point being, you could grow a small amount of tobacco, and it just had this enormous value.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when you start doing the math and you see that you could almost, like, if you were just a subsistence guy making, well, from what Joe Scott said, 25 cents a day to $1 a day. Dr. Murdoch said you could make $1 a day.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Scott was talking about making 25 cents a day. Did y'all hear that?
Yeah.
And so essentially you're making that range of money for just an uneducated laborer. And then you could like double your income by having 3 or 4 acres of tobacco.
Yeah.
And you kind of get the sense of how important that would be.
Yeah.
And moving from subsistence to like where you can actually buy things.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems on a farm is you can produce a lot, but converting it into cash is a big deal, and I don't know. That was just, I understand where they're coming from, like just to have something you can grow and just, there's a ready set market, man, that kind of thing is extremely rare in ag. So especially on that small of a acreage, it's just, I understand like a lot of why people got upset and blood and all that stuff, like it really was kind of a unique situation.
Yeah.
Compared to like cotton or something else where, you need so much land to do it and the labor, a small family could, like you said, double their income and he gave all the like put a calico dress for Easter and
Yeah,
have
yeah.
shoes and
Yeah.
that like I don't know, it's kind of a unique situation. It's really
Yeah.
cool to hear about.
Yeah. I think I'll start off by just asking you guys what stood out to you. Jeff, I might start with you. Just like the whole podcast, because there's 100 things. I want to talk about the Joe Scott interview. I want to talk about Bill Cunningham. I mean, there's 100 different things I want to talk about, but usually that's what we do, is just kind of like go around the room and just be like, what stood out to you, or what was your favorite thing, or something new you learned. But what stood out to you, Jeff?
Tell you what, man, I think the biggest thing is it's, and I think I said this whenever I first sent it to you all. It's such a challenging story. You know, you have these people who felt like they were, you know, being taken advantage of, and by all means they were. And so you can't blame them for wanting to, you know, eventually, like you're saying, eventually getting to the point where there's bloodshed because they're upset. But I think I sent you all the email to this thing after I read the first chapter of that book. And the way it had always been painted to me was obviously from the local standpoint of who the Night Riders were, why they were standing up against Duke. Well, if you read the first chapter of that book, I mean, he was an American success story too.
Yeah.
You know, his daddy limped home from the Civil War to, I think he had lost his wife. You know, kids were living with either an aunt or an uncle, something like that. And all they had was one mule and a patch of tobacco. You know what I mean?
And that was Washington Duke, James Buck Duke's dad.
Exactly.
Who became
the
Duke Trust.
And Buck hops on the trailer behind the mule, and they go start selling this tobacco. And next thing you know, Buck is growing this thing, and he's moving to New York, and he's the rebel now in New York City, trying to make a name for himself. And so, you know, in America, we celebrate that person too.
Yeah, yeah.
But then at what point does it become where it gets too much? And that's where you saw Washington Duke. You know, there's a quote he has in the book where he says something along the lines of, you know, there's 2 or 3 things I've never understood in this world: the Trinity and my son Buck.
Is that it? I remember that now.
And you know, he says that, and it goes, you know, and Judge Cunningham mentioned the same thing in there, that, you know, a successful entrepreneur sometimes is in the DNA. And so you have this guy who built this company up and probably reached a point where he could have started giving back. And, you know, at some point in his career, he forgot what it was like to be the farmer and to be the guy grinding every day. But then you also have this other side, and what challenges me is you have a guy like David Amos, where I hate to say it like this because I haven't had this thought till recently, but I go, this was an educated man who rallied up a lot of probably uneducated people to go do his bidding. Was he fulfilling a desire or a dream to be this war general that he never got to carry out from his days? And I think he went to like Hopkinsville Military School. Yeah. So you kind of wonder that, right? Yeah. Like, was this 2 egos that ultimately were colliding? Yeah. Or is it even not that big? Am I overthinking that? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know if that even answers your question.
Well, it's great.
It's just a lot.
We don't really ever see really why David Amos did what he did.
Yeah.
Like he never really tips his hat completely.
Yeah.
I mean, Judge Cunningham, who I probably should have referred to him as Judge Cunningham in the podcast. Sorry, sir. I called him Bill. He kind of painted the picture of him being this, well, it was just easy to buy into, being this kind of guy that was just looking out for his people.
Like with the freed slaves, he'd treat the freed slaves.
Yeah.
And
it makes sense. And I think the way the book reads is that's the case. But I don't know, you know, my mind started going there a little bit. And that probably is partly to do what I do for a living. You kind of try to examine both sides and go, all right, what's the motive behind this? But I can't help but think, was that potentially part of it?
Well, man, that's the same thing that happens in every story we tell.
Yeah.
Like we have in our mind a narrative that fits something inside of us. Because I was thinking the same thing. Is like David Amos a villain or a hero? And I honestly don't know still.
Yeah.
like what I think about him.
Yeah. That's what
Because
makes it a good story.
yeah, because he could have. I mean, if you could have just met him and talked with him, you probably could have got a sense of, does this guy really like feel sorry and empathetic towards people being taken advantage of by this like corporate criminal, or was it
Was there ulterior motives?
vindictive?
There, yeah.
Or
But if you saw him like a bunch of guys whooping up on someone with his kids screaming and his wife in their front yard and beating them senseless, it'd probably be pretty easy to make a judgment. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, like there's some real violence in this thing.
and he
Yeah.
absolutely had seemingly everything to do with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I mean, that was a whole organization, and you're going to have captains, and you're going to have squads, and you know, I mean, just.
And I
even
guess that part, what you're saying, I apologize for cutting you off, but
No.
I guess that part's what does it for me. It makes me go there because, you know, it makes a point to mention that in the book of how this guy was raised, and I think his daddy was a doctor too.
Yeah.
So you go, is this one? You know, you see this in movies and all that, where you see people who their family wants them to continue down the family line or what have you, but did he inside always want to be, you know, in this other world, and now this was his opportunity too?
Yeah.
And that's speculation. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I don't know, but
Well, and it was said in the book, maybe we said it, but he idolized these Civil War
Civil War
military
gen- yeah.
generals.
Yeah.
So maybe we said that. But yeah.
yeah.
No, that's a great point. Drew, what stood out to you?
So first, phenomenal job on the podcast. I've heard about this story since I was young, and growing up in that area and region of Kentucky. These guys Night Riders have been idolized. You know, David Amos, he still has signs in Cobb, Kentucky. I think Josh saw one of, you know, home of David Amos. I mean, he's still a hometown
they're
hero.
proud of him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I was always one-sided towards the Night Riders, but then once you start having experiences, you get older, you kind of are like, I don't know if they should have been doing all this.
Yeah.
But as far as the podcast goes, what I really loved about it was the book, and I think Judge Cunningham talked about it a little bit, that, you know, he was trying to be unbiased when he wrote the book. But that the last monologue of the second one, where he really expresses his opinions, and especially what he did for a career his whole life, when, you know, he swore to uphold the Constitution and the law, and to really get his perspective on it all, where he sympathizes with them, but he can't approve of it. I love that whole last 12, 15 minutes, whatever it was, where he kind of ran down his thoughts of it. That was a really good perspective.
Yeah.
It was. You know, he brought such authority on this subject. He was a perfect guest. Like, really, he was. And we didn't get into his background a ton, other than just, I kept saying that he was a Kentucky Supreme Court judge. He was more than that, though. I mean, he was
a Supreme Court justice.
Justice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But him saying what he said was like a pretty balanced view of it. And then his interpretation, his conclusion of how kind of the country handled the situation, I wouldn't have thought of, because he said the corporate criminal got dealt with, and
Right.
you know, the monopoly was broken up. Excuse me. And but also David Amos didn't even go to prison, which, you know, you could look at that and say, well, that's being soft on a pretty hard criminal, but he saw it as kind of like this balance. And then when he talked about jury nullification,
Yeah.
which was a mistake that we made. Someone sent it in. I thought Judge Bill Cunningham said jury notification, which didn't make sense to me. But he said jury nullification, which that makes sense. When a jury knows someone's guilty and basically just like lets the guy off. And he was saying that was like this kind of balance, which now that is the jury nullification. You could clearly see how that could be used in a good old boy system and totally be misused. But at the same time, sometimes somebody does something they don't really deserve what the law prescribes. And so it's, you know, kind of kind of a gray area probably, but it sounds like it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And probably usually used in a positive way. But yeah, I liked it when he said I've sent a lot of people to the penitentiary that I sympathized with.
Yeah.
For some reason that like gave kind of like humanized the law.
Yeah.
Almost like, not that it makes any difference to the guy who's going to the pen for 20 years to know that the judge sympathized with him.
Yeah.
But it makes you feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It was interesting how much faith you put in the judicial system.
Mm.
Even if there were things like jury nullification, like that person went through the proper channels and was dealt with, and now it's done, you know?
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Well, and also we have the book, or we have the 2-hour podcast to refer back to, but at the time that the jury nullified this was 1911, and it had been over for 2 to 3 years. So, you know, in the way when I heard Judge Cunningham talk about it, he's like, we're just going to put an end to this. It's done from here.
Let's just bury the hatchet and move on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Spence, what stood out to you about it?
There was a part where the gentleman, I get all the names mixed up, but the guy that was the Supreme Court justice. If that's someone's grandpa, I apologize. Can't keep it
Bill
straight, y'all.
Cunningham.
I'm sure somebody's, but no one's here.
There's too many sisters and brothers
know my-
and marriages. And
My kids are the tall blonde ones. That's how I go by life. But it's when he talked about, like, you know, there's that lady got 35,000, and it's like, but Duke was worth 200 million. Didn't even know if he even knew of the tobacco war.
yeah, that was kind of a letdown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I thought about like Solomon when he's like, vanity of vanities, all things are vanities.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, man, all this, people beat, people ruined, you know, just these lifetime of terrible memories, all the towns burned down. And the guy that it was all fighting against may not have even known it was happening.
Yeah.
And just like, golly, but I don't know. And also just there was that part of just like, and I don't know what to do with that. Just, it's a thinker.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you ask questions of like, which side would have been on? And I would have been on the vigilante side as a young guy, but I wouldn't now. Like, because I've changed. Like looking at myself
good
hard
answer.
in the mirror, you know, I probably would have turned narc. You know, like at some point, the first time I watched some guy,
You would have been a
beat.
hillbilly.
Yeah, well, just watching some guy get beat in front of his kids, like, that's not cool. You know, it's one thing you're fighting someone that wants to fight, but so and I think it's like that with a lot of American history, because it's our history. You know,
Yeah.
it's complicated. It's not one side. It's mixed, and I think that's what makes these stories so powerful, Clay. That you go about is, it's okay that it's complicated, because we're complicated and we're flawed. And a guy, you can respect a guy, but really hate something he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and just like us, like there's things I'm ashamed of in my past, and I hope they don't define me. Yeah. You know, so there's that aspect. And then also just like, I've been on the receiving end of something similar to this. And like,
the
I was
next
listening
Bear
to
Grease podcast.
Yeah,
Chicken
well,
Wars.
It's probably it's probably not that big, but you know. And I sent you a text to like, man, it really hit home. And Carla was my wife. We were sitting there. I was having coffee, and when it was really cold, and so like it's a great way to stay inside by talking to your wife. You know, when it's in the teens. And just like we were kind of reminiscing over that, you know, stuff that happened like a decade ago, and it is hard being an independent farmer. You know, and farming's just hard. And so much of like farmers are great folks generally. I mean, it's a slice of society. You got your dirt balls and that, but like, there's a reason we romanticize them. Like you talked about that, but it's just like, I just feel like sometimes the farming community throughout at least in American history, because I don't have a viewpoint to look at other countries, but golly, like, you know, like you were talking about there, that 200 million, what if he would have made 100 million? And all these other lives could have been radically changed. Like kids could have went to school with shoes on and no one's towns were burned. But there's that thing that always just like, you know, the average farmer gets 5 cents of a dollar or something, you know, like, and it's just that it's so easy to extract from agriculture. And those guys so rarely get what's deserved from something that we all do 3 times or maybe more a day, So
Eating.
it's just a thinker, man.
Yeah.
This was really impactful.
Good analysis, man. I like what you said about a young you would have been a vigilante, but an older you wouldn't have. And it's the luxury that we have today is that we get to hear this whole story, and we're not really emotionally involved with it. I mean, even if you're from there, you weren't there during
Right.
that time,
Right.
and we can historical revision. We can look back on it and think we can understand it. There's stuff going on today that they'll be making, turkey grease podcasts about, 50 years from now that maybe we're a part of. I think about that. It's like, what would be an equivalent today of something like this? But it's pretty extreme. I mean, violence is violence, whether it was done 3,000 years ago or today. But human nature is still the same. So people still are violent and do crazy stuff, even with the law. And perhaps it's less than it would have been. Anyway, point being, I'm with you. I think I would have sided with the farmers 100%. But I would have hoped I would have been
Which
a
set
voice
of
of
farmers?
reason.
But which set of farmers?
Ooh. Oh, gotcha. The association farmers.
Yeah.
I really would have, because I just would have been like, the corporation getting that much just seems unjust and what they were doing. But I think I would have been like, hey, there's a better way to do this, and I would have, that's the best version of my interpretation, which I don't know if it really would have been true. But I also think that, going back to your question of did it really matter? And essentially, Bill Cunningham's conclusion was that it really didn't. Like the Black Patch is like 30 counties out of how many, maybe 100+ counties that maybe grow tobacco in the country. I don't know. It was
probably more than that.
Probably more than that.
Because you got Virginia, North Carolina, and all.
Tons of counties.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's like, I'm just guessing, 10% of the tobacco country might be the Black Patch, maybe, or maybe less. So, how would this have affected these guys? And maybe it didn't really affect them at all. James Buck Duke wouldn't have even known what was going on. But it seems like it did get the attention of the nation at the time, as was evidenced by articles being written in national publications.
Right.
And you can't help but think that it would have brought attention to the powers that be that had that were changing some of these things. So maybe it had more impact than you would think.
To break up the monopoly and
yeah. But I guess the main thing was just the economic factors, that changed. Just like people started smoking more, so just like the demand just kept skyrocketing. But all pretty wild. Did y'all think I did a good enough job of like shaming tobacco users?
Now that you bring that up, I think there's a story that you need to clarify that I would love to hear more on, where you said you thought you heard the voice of God tell you not to dip anymore, and I've got to hear that story.
Well, I mean,
unless you would say for the next podcast.
When I say the voice of God, I didn't hear the audible voice of God.
Yeah,
but I'm very serious. I mean, I was probably 19 years old and dipped skull behind Juju and Pawpaw's back over here.
Did you know, Gary?
I knew.
You knew.
I knew other things, too, that you don't know that I knew.
Let's hear them.
I know I can't. I can't tell you.
Maybe I don't know.
Might tell you. I might tell you privately.
Did Juju know?
Juju, no.
Okay.
Well, I'm very interested to hear what you know, because I don't know if I know anything else.
As soon as you stop wearing tennis shoes, he knew.
That was the moment.
No, but I just, it was the time of my life when I started to just walk closer with God. And I literally remember one time driving down the road, chunking a can of Skull. I was littering. FBI agents are right here. But I chunked a can of Skull out the window.
Two wrongs don't make a right, Clay.
And
nullified.
Yeah, thank you. It's official. And I just knew it was bad. I just knew that like this is not something I want to do. So when I did this story, I'm kind of joking. I didn't want to glorify tobacco.
Yeah.
Because in a way, I mean, the agriculture and the farming of the tobacco is really cool. It's interesting.
It's a neat tradition.
But then when you dive into it, and it's like, yeah, this is really like
The seedy
something
underbelly.
the seedy underbelly of the world. I mean, and I just didn't want people to get the wrong idea.
Yeah.
I don't view personally tobacco use as just like something casual that is like okay. I mean, I have lots of great friends that chew tobacco. Probably half the people that listen to this podcast, and they should stop. So, I mean, period. Like, that's just the way I feel about it. Dad, what'd you think about it? Is that okay? Hey, when you have your own podcast, you can be preachy sometimes. You're in the FBI, am I right?
What's that?
I said you're an FBI agent.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is right?
Yeah, it's all you, man. Do your thing.
It's your podcast.
Your podcast. I'm the guest here.
No, I was looking for the FBI stamp of approval.
That's right. Hey,
Like
Fourth
Clay-
Amendment says you kick me out whenever you want
like
to.
the Dare McGruff the crime dog. Wasn't that like back in the 80s?
Yeah,
the FBI?
that's me. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
branch of Bear Grease
Hey,
that's
I have
anti-tobacco.
my middle boy is like head over heels with hunting, all that stuff. So hearing Clay like as a strong role model, saying don't do tobacco. You know, like sometimes you have that kid. And
I need a little like hand
McGruff
puppet
of
so
or
that
the
I could talk to these grown men and be like, hey guys, I'm Mr. Bear Grease.
Here you go. Use this bad boy right here.
You shouldn't do tobacco.
People are going to have a lot of mixed emotions about this
Well,
podcast.
I mean, I do too, but it's just sometimes the truth hurts. You know?
there you go.
But Dad, what stood out to you?
Well, I tell you, it was an amazing deal. But when you think about it, our country is made up of amazing deals. I mean, you can just take the personalities out and stick it in any place, the way the Indians were treated. It just keep going all the way through. And but I think about Mary Lou. Don't monkey with Mary Lou. You remember Mary Lou?
Yeah.
I mean, she was pretty. The women didn't like her. She was opinionated. The men didn't like her. And she ended up getting wealthy over this deal. And she pretty much
she did
put a
get
stop
shot
to
at
it.
quite a bunch, though.
Yeah.
She went through it.
She earned
But
it.
she, I mean, she was the first step in stopping it, wasn't she? Couldn't you say that?
That's the way Bill described it. Yeah, she was the first litigation against the Night Riders.
So if you got something going, you need to veer from Mary Lou. And then you think about our country being so new and young. I mean, it hadn't developed. We didn't have really strong unions. So they have vigilantes. So, I get upset sometimes with union stuff, but they really served a purpose in our country.
Yeah.
They
Especially at that time,
established the worker to have a voice. They didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
Antitrust. I mean, all it would have taken was a few years later and have a law passed where, hey, if you get so big, man, we're going to bust you up and we're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure so a lot of legal things developed out of this that kind of put a quietus on I love the vigilantes. When I was young, I used to think, man, somebody ought to take that kid right there, take him out behind the barn and just beat the snot out of him.
That's what he did with us.
Dipping, yeah.
But you couldn't do it because you might have 5 good ideas, but you could have 4 bad ideas, so you need the law, the Constitution to come in and establish all this. And I think we did a great job of doing that to keep our country on track. And this story just absolutely puts a magnifying glass on all that.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a lot of that stuff established. And because of this and many other stories, the law developed, the antitrust, the breaking up monopolies, the unions where the workers have voices and so forth.
Well, it was really insightful to me to hear Bill Cunningham talk about how this very issue has overthrown a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Because, when the government would, and I feel like what he's talking about is like when the government saw that these monopolies had so much power and they came in and said, we're going to take some of that power away from you. I mean, that's like a step towards communism. in a way. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like government control of business,
Right.
but they did it just enough that it allowed people to still be massively successful without it just totally crippling their workers. So they kind of did it like just enough. And then the unions. I agree with what you're saying. Like, you kind of have sometimes the union stuff I don't understand fully, but it has helped a lot of people in the country. And so they just did everything kind of just right that set America up for the next 100 years, which would, make us, so successful in many ways.
And you had like it. They touched on it, and I thought it was really good because, like, if you back out sometimes you look at little something to get an idea, but you back out, and this story was playing at that time. Like, it was a really turbulent time, right? Like, you had all the barons, like or robber barons or whatever, like Vanderbilt and all them. You had railroads going up. You had Upton Sinclair's The Jungle with like people falling into pickle vats or meat packing plants. You had all the like the automotive stuffs, like where they're fighting cops and stuff and gunfights. You had all the Al Capone and like Bonnie and Clyde, and like that was all in this time period coming off the Civil War. Tulsa was burned. You had the sharecroppers and like desegregation, all these things. This country was just roiling, and it's all messy.
Yeah.
I think it's just sometimes it's just messy.
And it could have gone a lot of different ways.
It could have.
And
absolutely.
it kind of moved towards stability to some degree. And there's different groups of people that would argue that it didn't. But in general, it moved towards stability, at least as you compare to other parts of the world, But it's what I love about these stories. So this book, I've got Bill Cunningham's book right here. This book, as I understand it, it would have been kind of a regionally known. I mean, this wasn't like a New York Times bestseller,
Right.
But it's a fantastic book, fantastic story that many people outside of the Black Patch would have never heard. Like
People inside the Black Patch haven't heard it.
Yeah.
Well, if you do read, I would encourage anybody listening to read it because there's so much you guys just can't cover in a podcast.
Right.
Like
2 hours.
There's small little, anecdotes and different things in there about some of the other experiences that were going on out there that are just unreal. And you really get that feel for how violent it was, at some points. And, like he mentions, and, it was just discussing there, like it just, at some point, this thing became more violent than it probably was even intended on becoming, and I think we see that happen all the time in, in history and in today's world. People join in on something, and then all of a sudden somebody else comes in to escalate it because they're not really worried about the mission anymore.
Yeah.
They're just looking to crack some skulls, right? And you had some of that infiltrated towards the end there.
Well, that was something
that up,
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to say that on here. Sometimes in an episode you just don't have enough space or time to say everything.
For sure.
But there was some accusation of the Night Riders being a racist organization because, I mean, it would have been probably at the pinnacle of like Ku Klux Klan. Ku Klux Klan. Do you know it's the Ku Klux Klan?
Isn't it KKK though?
It is.
According to the Ramones song.
Yeah. Well,
KKK
Steve
took my baby
Ranella
away.
has mocked me before over saying the Ku Klux Klan.
You're taking
It was founded in your state, wasn't it?
Well,
Wasn't it Arkansas?
hey, now I don't know about that, but there was some talk of that. And basically, in Bill's book, which is my source, he had a section where he talked about how that there were a lot of African Americans in the association, not necessarily Night Riders though, because that was a very segregated society. So they kind of like lived in different places. But as the thing went further and further, people would, under the name of the Night Riders, probably do some stuff completely off mission.
Yeah.
And so there probably was some racist stuff going on that kind of was like this overlap between, these groups of people. So that was something that was talked about. But then there were a lot of people, guys that just kind of under the hood of a black mask just started doing crazy stuff that had nothing to do with tobacco, but they were kind of lumped in with night riders. So it wasn't just all this like really clear cut mission.
And
Is that a good description?
I think so.
Kind
Yeah.
of.
No, I think you're right on with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of bad things happen under anonymity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anonymity seems to be a fuel for fire sometimes.
Sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
it happens all the time on the internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People leaving comments and saying horrible things that I guarantee most of them would never say face to face to another person. That was a kind of that time period's version of that, where they felt the freedom to go do that. Maybe not freedom, but they felt the protection or just that anonymity to go and do things that they wouldn't do.
You know what somebody should make fun of me for in this episode is how many times I said clandestine.
What's wrong
Did
with
you?
that?
Well, I just felt really smart when I said it. And so I think I just kept saying it. And I actually said it yesterday in like casual conversation with someone.
It's a
And they
good
were
one
like,
to mix in if you can.
They were like, "What?" And I said, "Clandestine, just like secret." And they were like, "That word makes me uncomfortable." But
You just look them square in the eye and go, it should.
yeah.
What are you hiding?
What are you hiding? No, okay. Maybe the last thing I want to talk about. We can continue talking, but certainly something I wanted to talk about was the Joe Scott interview. So for a Bear Grease podcast, and now going back to Jeff giving us this one like all wadded up in a little bundle, we didn't know about this Joe Scott interview, which to me is so cool. Anytime that you can reach back into history and actually hear someone that was there in an interview format is really unique. It reminded me of back in the late summer, we did a series on the formation of the Buffalo National River, which was over here in Arkansas. And in the process of interviewing these people, we'd talked about this lady named Granny Henderson, and I found out there was this long interview with Granny Henderson that essentially nobody had heard. I mean, somebody did, but it was very obscure. And I was able to go into that interview, and you could hear Granny Henderson's voice, this woman born in the 1800s, and hear her talking about her life, and it's super interesting. This was like that. And so this Joe Scott interview, he was 97 years old in the 1980s. Bill Cunningham interviews him when Bill's a young man. Bill's in his 80s now, probably.
He's
I think
82.
so.
Yeah, so Bill would have been in his 40s, I guess. He interviews Joe Scott, and that's El Primo stuff when you get to hear from the guy.
Absolutely.
And it was a long interview. It was hard to go through and pick out which sections to use, but I mainly just wanted people to kind of hear his voice. And Joe became kind of like this focal point of Joe was a night rider and he was doing all this stuff. I just couldn't quite put it all in. I didn't want to villainize Joe either for being the last guy and just being willing to talk. But he said the only thing that he really ever did in one of the raids was like shoot his gun in the air. Like he was just kind of there.
Yeah.
Now, he did insinuate that he was on some of the visits, but he didn't ever specifically say, like, I beat somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, an 18-year-old kid, and they're just looking for warm bodies to kind of ride with them and just kind of be there, I have a feeling he didn't actually do much. He was just kind of
Present.
there. That was the insinuation I got, because he never got super specific. But you might, I mean, at 87 years old, I mean, you might not remember everything, but
I think those are the things you remember when you're 87.
yeah.
Like that kind of stuff, I think you remember it. Just like when you talk like war vets or whatever, like those are the things that are burned into your brain.
Yeah.
Like you burnt, because I think was it Hoganville? What was it?
Hopkinsville.
Hopkinsville. He said he was there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, that town burned down.
Mhm.
You don't forget about burning down a town.
Okay, they specifically asked him, they said, what did you do at maybe Hopkinsville?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I didn't do nothing. I just rode around on my horse and shot my gun in the air a couple times.
Man, your house is burning down. You probably don't take that viewpoint of it, though.
But then again, you wonder how truthful the guy was being. I mean, here he is. It seems so not innocent, but it seems so like it just was inconsequential. Him at his age talking about it. It's not like they're going to send him to prison or something. But he was very worried about that. Actually, there were parts of the episode when he was like, "Maybe I shouldn't be talking." But
hey, interesting view of this would be what would have happened back then had Dr. Amos had not been there with his leadership skills. It probably would have just floundered around and the same thing would have happened. It would just taken a different route, probably a better route. I don't know, probably a better route.
Yeah.
So the way to handle it as you look back would be through the courts. Hey, we got this big guy out here that's monkeying with us. Let's levelize the playing field. This isn't fair, and they didn't have those tools to go to. The only tool they had was, vigilante stuff.
Well, because the courts, you ain't going to win against a guy with $200 million.
No.
I mean, that's also part of the American experience.
When you don't even have money
to buy
go to
shoes
golf
for your kids, or the time, and you need to be working. And
well, what they did was probably what they sort of had to do. I mean, they didn't have avenues like we have today. So it's just like, hey, just fold your tents up, let them take advantage of you, or we're going to fight.
It's hard to judge somebody from a position you've never been in.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what, Judge Cunningham was getting to when he says, I've sent people to the pen that I had empathy for.
Yeah.
And, in our line of work, you see it every day too. I mean, I remember my dad telling me, when I was a kid that, in police work and in law enforcement, the vast majority of people that you're going to interact with, they got themselves caught up in something they never meant to get caught up in. And there's plenty of people that it's all they've ever known. Sometimes it's a lifestyle all they've ever known, or like Cunningham said, I knew the guy's dad. I knew his dad was abusing him his whole life. And you have empathy for people, and it doesn't make it right that they broke the law, but you're a human being, and that's what's going to happen, And so I think it's hard to make a judgment on somebody for any kind of situation if you've never been in it yourself, and that's something I think that's what this podcast does so well, and you guys did it with this story. And as a Kentuckian, I'm honored that you all did it. But it's the beauty of this deal that y'all have going on here, man, is you make people think, and we are constantly in today's world, just find ourselves in echo chambers and never having to think critically.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, man, history is messy.
Yeah.
Life is messy. There is not a single thing out here that any of us, in my opinion, there's been one perfect person walk this earth, and we put him on a tree. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And so, I think it just, you guys do such a good job of that, of causing your listeners to think about it, to go, man, how do you digest this story, and how do you see both sides of it, and then come to your best?
Well, and to piggyback off that, not only do we not know what life was like in that time, being a farmer who was getting taken advantage of by this trust, but much like Joe Scott, I can't tell you what I would have done if somebody would have came to my house, stuck a gun in my face, and said, "Let's go."
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the best line in it.
Yeah, from that point on, I'm probably like, let's go.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the night riders, and a lot of times the night riders and the association will get put one in the same, but you had 25,000 members of an association, and at most probably 500 night riders. So you're talking 2% of this massive, association that a lot of times will get tied in together. And as we heard later on, as they continued with the raids and then some of the beatings and stuff, it probably wasn't even association stuff that they were doing.
Right.
So, but I've never had somebody point a gun at me and tell me to do something, but I can imagine that'd get me to react a little bit different.
Well, that's exactly Joe Scott's answer, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When they said, he said, "Why did you join the Night Riders?" And he gave such a great, pointed, clear answer. He said, "What would you do if they stuck a gun in your face and told you to go?" You'd probably go.
Let's go.
Where are we going?
But it's not just random people either. It's your neighbors up the holler. It's if you say no, well, you're going to be looking over your back for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
because you
and-
live right next to them.
and it's so
your community.
Clear too why these guys weren't getting in trouble, because when we first got to that point in the podcast where we're talking about they couldn't prosecute these guys. Like in some world, you'd kind of be like, well, why? How the heck could they not prosecute them? They were doing all this criminal activity. But oh gosh, you would have been narking on your
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
on your family, on your neighbors.
Yep.
And man, part of here's one thing that I thought about when, like, what would I have done? I think in the right scenario, you could have just navigated yourself out of the situation and not been on either side. I mean, I don't know how, but I know in my life I do that a lot.
But where would you
baby.
where would you
In a-
sell
in a-
your
in a-
tobacco to?
No, but in a I don't know the answer, but
Yeah.
I just feel like you could just like slide under the radar. I just don't know that I would have been the guy that had been coming to beat because I was making a big deal about selling to the Duke Trust, but also I don't know. There's ways to do it. Like there's social ways to not be a target.
You know, I
don't
was
know if
thinking
that makes
about
sense.
too. I was thinking about too because Duke had likely had no knowledge of the details of what was going on there, and I had to think about like what was causing them to drop price. To start paying. I mean, you must have had these regional buyers that were making on the fly decisions about what they were going to pay people, and they were the ones who were really beating up on them, financially. And a lot of that stuff was probably had to do with that middle management. You know what I mean? These guys that are, how are we going to get the best price for this tobacco? And without this big oversight of the big Duke Trust. And so you have to be able to see the small details of this. And this was their best response, was to create this Planters Protection Association and to fight this, what they perceived as greed. So there's just so many minute things that you just don't know about to say who the good guys or bad guys. I think that's what the title of the podcast, The Blurred Lines, Good Guys versus Bad Guys, I think is really fitting because it is hard to know. You know what I mean? And I think that bleeds over into a lot of the things that we deal with even in modern times. It's so easy to jump on a bandwagon and not know the details of a situation. And I think, probably people in New York would have, had they heard about this, they would have said, you got these rebellious farmers down there just doing these horrible things. And then you've got these small town farmers saying, we're getting taken advantage of. And I think it has to cause people to stop and evaluate and to try to learn more. I think about political situations. I think about, how things are perceived there. You can't just, like you talked about echo chambers, you can't just listen to an echo chamber. You have to really be on your guard for what you hear and what you believe.
Let's play trivia.
Yeah.
We're going to end with trivia here. Does that sound
Go for
good? You guys think you're all black patch experts?
These guys
hey,
are.
let me clarify. While he's handing out boards, I want to clarify what I said a minute ago. Basically, what I was saying was you don't have to be in every fight that's being fought.
Yeah.
Because when I said you can navigate around something, an old believer said, "What?" That's what I mean. It's like you don't have to fight every fight.
Wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
There you go. All right, we're going to play a little trivia. Josh has 7 questions. The winner gets the Panther lamp. Not true. We're keeping that one.
Everybody's wives just breathed a sigh of relief. Got one for me there.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, I tell you what.
Look at that.
Here's what I am going to do.
Here
Not
goes
even a
Spence.
baseball
This
player.
this is what we're doing on this episode. The winner of this trivia, which I'm not playing, I'm just going to be commentating, wins this Moultrie trail cam.
Oh,
Wow.
Drew.
Silas, I'm trying, buddy.
Stakes are high.
Stakes are high, and I can probably even get you like a subscription from Moultrie to be able to run this bad boy because this is a cell camera.
Is Josh eligible?
He's already got some.
Yeah, and Gary, that would be nepotism. So really, it's just
That's
three.
true.
There's three
It's
people.
really-
It's gotta
Down
go
to three.
We're down to 3.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the winner's getting a Moultrie trail cam. All right, Josh. Hit us.
Okay. First, we got some questions that everybody should know. We got a couple that you really had to be on your game to catch. Okay?
Did you use the one that I said was going to be on here,
The one
or
that
were you
said-
paying attention?
Oh, I forgot about.
I
that.
knew it. I knew when I said it wouldn't be on here.
You can ask that
I said
question.
on the episode. I said this will be on trivia. Go ahead, carry on. We'll move through this pretty quick.
Okay, big question. Who was the founder of the American Tobacco Company?
Don't be misled by. Okay, go ahead.
I think it was
I have
Christian
nothing
Laettner.
to say.
Was it-
Christian Laettner. Do you think people got that joke? when I
Oh, they
said
got
Christian?
it.
Man, you were
They got
leaning
it,
into
and
it
I
hard.
appreciate it.
Oh, guys, I don't know that like my 20-year-old son would or 19-year-old son would have got it though. They don't know who Christian Laettner is.
No.
Okay, Terrell Spencer.
Duke.
Duke.
James Buck Duke.
James Buck Duke.
Duke.
I put Washington Duke.
It is Washington Duke.
That's got to be the answer. Y'all are right, but
Good
it's
one.
Washington Duke.
Yeah.
I think the more
Good
we
one.
back this out, the better for me.
That's what I was gonna. That's what I was trying to allude in my preamble.
Yep.
Was it's got to be specific. I don't even. Did we even say that on the podcast though? Did we say
I don't know.
Washington Duke?
I actually I don't know.
You
that
may
it
have
was
been
that.
cheated.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
should join a union.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question. Everyone should get this one. Who was known as the leader of the Night Riders?
Oh, this is. Come on.
Everyone should get this one.
Okay.
Everybody should get a gimme. Okay, Drew, we're starting with you.
David Amos.
That is correct. David Amos, PhD. It's actually MD.
Sorry,
Do
bud.
I still get the points?
Yes.
Trail
Still good luck.
cameras
David
fading.
Amos. Gary.
Sorry, Silas.
I just couldn't pull it up, man.
Okay.
0.
Amos.
Famous Amos. You think that's the same guy as the cookie guy?
Probably.
No, there's actually a story about that.
I know.
I can't
Their
remember.
cookies are addictive, though.
He's
It's
in
not nicotine.
The Office.
Okay, here's
episode.
a bit of an obscure question that was mentioned in there. Okay. Who was known as the Moses of the Black Patch?
Hmm.
That one's a
I'm
bit
terrible
obscure.
at names. I just need.
That one's a bit obscure.
Yeah, he was only mentioned once. It's
Yeah.
a tough question.
This is.
Sorry, Silas.
That's our-
We got a couple
Yeah.
ringers in here.
Us Arkansans.
Yep.
We're at Gary. We're
Okay. Drew.
Felix Ewing.
Felix Ewing.
Felix Ewing.
Felix, you
Ewing.
good? Mm.
Felix Ewing. Gary.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
Felix Ewing is correct. Okay.
People back in the black patch are they're like,
Yeah,
Yeah. Here's another question. Spence, you might remember this one.
Thanks, Josh.
What was the term given to those who would scrape plant beds as an intimidation
Oh,
tactic?
Spence will get that.
I don't know. Remember the first word. No, I ain't cheating. I'm a man of integrity.
Okay, Gary, we're going to start with you.
Ho.
Ho hands.
Ho hands. Okay.
Close.
Jeff.
Ho Toters.
Ho toters.
Oh,
Ho Doders.
Ho toters.
Hodos.
Hodos.
I think that's like a hostess. You buy them in the gas
That's
station.
close.
They got
That's
Okay,
close.
so-
those
so-
have some kind of icing on top. And
Yeah,
cream
yeah,
filling.
they
Hey,
got
can
this
I
chocolate.
ask my question?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So
Wait, how many? Jeff, you've got
He's gotten all of them.
Damn,
4.
three.
Has it been 3 or 4?
3.
3.
I think 3.
That's 4, actually.
Okay.
So 4, 3,
2.5.
2.5. Okay.
okay. So my question is, what was the original name of the Night Riders? They were first known as the X, but then they later became known as the Night Riders.
We got people scribbling here.
Every time, see, Every time you say Knight Rider, I think of the '80s car.
Yeah.
Kit.
What was it? Dang it! You could have asked that. What was the name of the Knight Rider?
that
80s car?
That should
Should have been the bonus question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Silas.
Who was the star of Knight Rider?
Tom Selleck.
All right,
No.
we're ready.
Who was? Oh,
David
David
Hasselhoff.
Hasselhoff.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're thinking Magnum PI.
That was it.
Okay. Drew.
Possum
Possum
hunters.
hunters.
Man, these,
I knew
these guys
possum.
are on
I didn't
it.
know that was the question.
He's from Princeton, though.
Yeah.
Princeton,
Born.
Kentucky.
I'm not from there.
Jeff's
but
wrong.
yeah.
Jeff's wrong.
Opossum.
He is wrong.
Oh,
That is wrong.
this is a judgment call.
Yeah, no.
Opossum hunters.
I don't know when did we just all come together and decide that O wasn't going in front of possum anymore?
It's too
Yeah.
hard to
It's
say.
just-
I mean,
Yeah, it was a conference in
And a
1887
Possum.
in Nashville, Tennessee.
Gary, did you get anything?
Possum.
Possum Crew.
Okay.
The Possum Crew. You should get some points for that.
Okay. Question number 6. Why did Joe Scott want to tell his story so late in life?
Or what was the
Why was he willing?
motivation?
Why was he willing
Why was he willing?
to
That's
tell
a better
his
answer there.
story so late in life?
It's mentioned a couple times.
Yep. Okay, Spence. Statute of limitations.
that might be the right answer.
That's fair.
Drew?
Everyone else was dead.
Mm.
Same thing I put.
Yep,
Everyone else was dead.
that's
Oh,
correct.
good,
That is
good,
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next question.
We need to have another soils-based podcast.
Yeah.
So I can
Hey, call
I'm
Dr.
getting
Murdoch for that
kicked,
one.
man.
Where did the mayor of Hopkinsville seek refuge during the raid?
Mm.
From the God-fearing men.
Yeah. Be specific. We're looking for a specific answer. Okay, Jeff, we're going to go with you.
Coal chute of the Baptist Church.
Oh, wow. That was specific. Baptist Church.
Methodist
Church.
Basement
And
of the Baptist church down the coal chute.
Man, these guys are good.
the
Was it-
Baptist, the
That
coal
was
chute
Baptist.
down the coal chute of the
Well,
Baptist.
I think
He
we
went
should
through-
accept Baptist Church.
Yeah, Baptist Church.
Little plug.
That absolutely
Yeah.
not the Methodist Church. He
I
was
grew up
Methodist.
Catholic.
He was
it was all the
Methodist.
same.
He was Methodist.
Anybody different than us was just the same.
Yeah,
It was-
Clay, what do you have
Should've
against
wrote
Methodist, by the
Protestant.
way?
No, if they'd have said any denomination, I would have said that same thing. I've got nothing against the Methodists.
Okay, for our
It was
last
just an easy shot right in the kidney.
our last question. What was the reported net worth of James B. Duke in 1907?
Mm.
Spence, I like the confidence that you wrote that down with.
Yeah.
That's
I'm really
fresh.
I'm really Calipari-ing this up right now. I'm right in the back of the conference, man, looking up.
Okay, Spence, we'll start with you. 200 million,
200 million.
200 million,
200 million.
200 million.
They all got it.
And for our final question, we have all right answers. Well done, everybody.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
Ends our trivia.
so Clay said, 200 million was an enormous amount of wealth back then. That's an enormous amount of wealth now.
Yeah,
No doubt.
doubt.
I mean, like,
No doubt.
I wouldn't mind 200 million right now.
I would imagine that would be like
Could
a
eke out
billionaire
living.
today.
He'd be like
he'd
Elon.
be
He was
multi,
the Elon
yeah.
Musk at his time.
Yeah. Okay. Closing down here. The final little section of the podcast, we learn that James Buck Duke buys the name of Duke University, which probably, like, when I read that, I had a tendency to be like, oh, come on, rich guy. There's probably a bigger story, perhaps. Or I wonder how the people at Duke feel about it. Like, is that y'all might know, is that a negative thing, or is that just part of their history?
It's funny. I think he touches on it in the
Are you
book.
a Duke fan? I thought you were Louisville.
No, I'm a little
Okay.
fan. Yeah.
Okay.
We can
Yeah.
throw Duke under the bus.
I don't care what you do, man. I'm just,
Ain't no one from North Carolina.
That's right.
No, there's some
So-
good folks over there.
But it's it's interesting. He touches on it in the book that, like, when Duke first approached them about giving them this money and wanting to rename it, it seems like it was a fairly devout, like Methodist college.
Yeah, it was called Trinity College.
Yeah, and it seemed like there was some administration that was like, this guy's this dude's slinging cigarettes. I don't think we can't take any part of this. And then I think it's just kind of funny. We're like $6 million.
Yeah.
I think the Lord forgives.
Yeah.
Does he not?
It's like Duke has
it's called
nice ring
divine
to
nullification.
That's right.
Divine nullification.
Yeah. That's right. Like, hey, I think the Lord can overlook this one. How many more souls are we going to save versus losing from here? But so it was kind of funny the way he touches on that. But that seemed to be his brother was much more involved with that school,
and his dad,
right? Yeah. And they both were fairly devout Methodists, I think. And I think that was why it was troubling to them as they watched Buck kind of take off with this, with the corporation. And so
it's interesting because you said his dad said the two things I don't understand are the Trinity and my son, and then his son buys Trinity College.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a
full circle.
Full circle. Yeah.
It is,
circle.
man. It's and then the way the book ends and the way you ended the podcast. Like, I mean, Amos's son goes on to be the first medical, professor for the medical school. Like, it's unbelievable. It's just such a crazy story, with such unique, characters.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
So who won? Jeff won.
Jeff won.
Did you miss one?
I missed the first one. I put James Buck instead of Patriarch there.
Well,
congratulations on this. So Jeff, you're gonna get a Moultrie Edge 2 camera. Do you deer hunt?
Yeah.
So this will be useful to you.
Absolutely.
And I think I can hook you up with
got a 3 on it though. It's an Edge 2.
Well, this was actually my personal camera and so the 3 is this is the third one.
The third of
yeah, they're really good.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Use it for your undercover work too.
Yeah, this is gonna revolution. He's gonna take that back to the FBI and they're gonna be like, "What's that?"
Yeah. Moultrie's gonna get like
we've never had one of those.
Truckloads of the federal government.
Yeah,
it's all gonna be. You're gonna get a slice
for about 3 times the price.
Yeah. This could be good. Thank you guys so much for coming. Man, came all the way from Kentucky. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, really. And thanks for the suggestion on the podcast, man.
Absolutely, man. Like I said, I'm honored you guys. I was not expecting, first off, even to get a reply, let alone you guys run with it. But I'm glad you did, and it's been great getting to work with you guys and meet you guys through this, man. It's awesome, and keep it up, man. People need it.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Keep the wild places wild because that's where the bears live. There's no criminals there. And the FBI is not there.
Occasionally.